Booyakacha Booktube. Today is Tuesday. Time for tag. I actually can trace this one back to its creator. I have her up on my screen right now. It's Book Chat with Pat. Great minds think alike, but that doesn't mean we can't. Haha. I say for myself, not for Pat, who is a great mind. But anyway, created a tag about that she calls the high school required reading tag. It's very interesting in conjunction with the tag I created not too long ago about creating a common core curriculum for high school, well, for school in the States. So this one's a little bit more fun. Mine was a little bit more serious. So there's 10 questions plus tagging. And here we go. The number one question is high school crush. Name a book you were assigned in high school and loved at the time. Have you reread it and did it hold up? Yes, I loved Candide, and it definitely holds up. In fact, I made a video about it not long ago. Two, in fact, one the pastiche and one after the earthquake. So one of the reasons I remember this especially is that in one of our classes we had to make a poster about a book that we'd read. And so I made the poster of, I remember there was Cunegonde was riding a donkey with her one buttock. Candide, I can't remember what he was suffering from. Pangloss, who, if you remember, was the philosopher, he had, like, lost his nose to syphilis, and he had been burned and drowned, and like somehow I showed all of this. And of course, Pangloss was saying, "This is the best of all possible worlds." I thought it was a pretty fun poster. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is gym class. Name a book you were assigned that you hated. Have or would you give it a second chance? This is somebody who did not like gym class. I didn't either. They used to throw my shoes. My poor mother couldn't afford shoes in the swamp all the time. Oddly, then I went on to letter in three sports in high school. But anyway, a book that I was assigned that I hated. I hated The Old Man and the Sea. Um, Oddly, I like The Natural, although I hate baseball. I've gone on to read Mahmoud. He's got great stuff. And I've gone on to love Hemingway. I think the problem is that when books are assigned in high school, they have to look for the book that has the least language, problems in language, problematic, no sex, no violence, no anything problematic. They have to choose their sort of the safest works, even though they are by great authors. They're not the best works from those authors. And sadly, many people never go on to reread those authors because they're like, oh, Hemingway hated him. Luckily, I've gone on to reread almost all the authors that I read in school. I think that's why a lot of people hate the works that they were forced to read in school. Okay, three is the locker combo. Is there a book you remember having to read but can't actually remember? Um, yes, actually. So I was fascinated by Native American stuff in high school, and so I read a lot for a research paper that I did. I remember the literature, like I remember I heard The Owl Called My Name and classics that I've mentioned in my other videos. But I also read a lot of like the history of all the different nations, but especially of like the all that history about the BIA and the BIA New Deal under John Collier, and I'm surprised I remember that much about it. Yeah, I don't remember all of that very well, nor do I remember I was bound and determined to be able to well explain to my comrades in class the differences between communism and socialism. So I remember reading a lot of communism, socialism stuff as well. That I can't recall the details of. So those are some of the things that I don't remember very well anymore in detail. Four is CliffNotes. Was there a book you were supposed to read but didn't? No, actually. In high school, I did not have a lot going on. Although I mentioned the sports, and in a minute we'll find out about D&D. But I think I read everything that I was supposed to in high school and more probably. Though we didn't have a very good local library where I went to high school in a small town. Um, In college is when I started not doing a lot of the reading. First of all, I was doing history and literature, the two subjects that assigned by far the most reading. Um, and so there were tons of huge books to read every week. But also, I came alive in college. I was super active in student government and sports and um, every club I could join, and I did college radio, you name it, I did it. So, in fact, I remember a professor like calling me out one day. He's like, you're such a bright student, but your efforts are sort of uh, lacking, and you miss classes and stuff. And I said, look, I'm in college. There's all these wonderful women around, and lots of fun events to go to, and I'm trying to live a full life. And he was like, yeah, I totally get it. And to be honest, I think I've used the stuff that I learned. It's certainly like student government stuff as well as like journalism. I wrote for the paper and the radio and all that. I think I've used some of those skills as much in my work life as I used all the stuff I learned in school. So I don't regret my strategy. But in high school, I read everything that was assigned. All right. Electives. Did you read just for fun? What books were you reading outside of your assignments? Yes, I read mainly fantasy and science fiction, which I'll get to why in a minute, as well as I didn't read a ton of mysteries, but I imagine I read quite a few of the Agatha Christie's. We had those. And then I had a subscription to, among other things, Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine, which was awesome. But I also, for whatever reason, I remember the first books I took out from that local library in our town. I read classics just from the get-go. I don't know why. Who told me to? I just picked. So, like, I remember the first two I took were Pride and Prejudice and Montaigne's Essays. And I loved them both. So that was the kind of reading that I was doing for fun, pretty broad. Rebound, 6, rebound. What book would you replace from the typical assigned reading list? Yes, I would replace A Separate Peace, Lord of the Flies, all of these books that we were forced to read as teenagers, facing mean teenagers every day in the hallway, in the school bus, in our lives. We had to read books about teenagers being mean. No, thank you very much. What kind of torture was that? I've gone on to read Golding, Pincher Martin, The Spire, those other things by those authors. But yes, I would replace anything that is about young people suffering, especially at the hands of other young people that we were forced to read in high school, which was a lot for some reason. I would replace it with, I think, the Beats. I think that would really have turned me on as a young reader. Like On the Road, of course, Dharma Bums, a lot of great stuff. So yeah, so number 7, Teacher's Pet. What book got you excited about reading for class? Yeah, so this is the one I want to talk about. So this is actually junior high, so I think it was 8th grade. So right before high school, we were in the swamps of Florida, and this was the worst. I'd gone to inner city schools in the Bronx, I've gone to all kinds of schools, but this one took the cake. No one knew how to read. It was pretty bad. So I remember my English teacher, assigning the sort of like what you did for your summer. She was almost crying over my little essay, such a simple couple paragraphs about my summer. She's like, you can write, you can punctuate. And so she would give me books all the time. She probably inscribed them. You're my only hope. Oh, that poor teacher. How did she end up there? But anyway, they were often, maybe exclusively for some reason, sci-fi. Maybe she thought I was interested in that, although I'm not sure I had identified that yet, because I hadn't discovered the main thing, which was D&D. But maybe it was what she liked to read, so it sort of shaped how I became as a reader. But I think I was destined for fantasy anyway. So I read Lord of the Rings, Narnia, Earthsea, bunches of series, and especially I was obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons. So I read there are a lot of Dungeons and Dragons books. Even though this was the first incarnation, there were no like 2.0, 3.0 advanced D&D. No, this was the very beginning, which I think was by far the best. So I was obsessed with that. So all my disposable income I spent buying modules for that. And so I would write, and so when I would write, I would send out things to like fantasy and science fiction. They didn't ever publish me. And Dragon magazine, I did get a couple little things published. Magazines like that. So yeah, I was obsessed with D&D, but oddly, creating my D&D world, but I didn't really let anyone play in it. Not probably by choice, I just didn't really have any friends. So I created worlds and worlds, but no one adventured in them. Sad. All right, 8, study hall. What was the most difficult book you read in high school? The one you spent the most time studying? Probably the most difficult was when I was beginning to read literature in Spanish and in French. Martí, La Fontaine. So those would be a little difficult. I was pretty good with Shakespeare. It's pretty fine reading Shakespeare. I didn't find that too difficult. Although I am not of the generation anymore who had to learn sort of Greek and Latin and stuff like that. I think neither was my dad, but I do remember my dad telling me that he had to learn by heart, Chaucer in the English of Chaucer. Want in a prorain hath persit through the route, all that kind of stuff. So we didn't have to do that anymore certainly in public school in my era. All right. 9, nails on a chalkboard. What was the book that made you groan when you found out you'd have to read it again? Okay, so I moved almost every year, couple times every 2 years, but pretty much every year growing up, from a young age, maybe 3rd grade, and then stopped moving in high school. I informed my mom that, if they needed to move again, I was going to stay. But because of all that moving around, it just so happened that I had to take biology 3 years in a row, the exact same biology textbook. And these are 3 different states. By the time I did that in high school biology, I begged them. I said, please let me take physics. I can tell you, this biology book by heart. And they wouldn't let me because in your 10th grade, you do biology. You do physics in, 12th grade. So I never did get to do physics. And I had to do that biology for the 3rd time. So yes, I groaned mightily over that course. And I've pretty much hated biology ever since. No, I like it. I'm interested in everything now, but it took a while to get over that one. 10, extra credit. What book do you think should be added on to every high school reading list? Oh my gosh, there are so many. So I started to make a long list, and I'm like, nope, stop. That's going to go on forever. Let's just dial it back to real simple. People's History, Howard Zinn, and Lies My Teacher Told Me. So those would be my additions. But my original tag is basically inviting you to do exactly that, to add things to our curriculum, to create a core curriculum for the United States, which we do not have. So if you have a little time and you enjoy it, you can do this one. You can do my tag as well when you have a chance. And now for this one, I would like to tag, I'm going to tag the booktubers that I think that I know are teachers or retired teachers. But I don't have that on the top of my tongue, so I'm going to put that down in the description box. Thank you for sitting with me as we went through high school all over again.